Hello and welcome back to Redirected. My name is Andrew East, and this is a show where we sit down with celebrities, athletes, entrepreneurs, really anybody who has experienced a change or pivot in life. Today, we sit down with a special guest, Rebecca Fleischman, as part of our Forbes 30 for 30 series. And Rebecca has a really cool story. After being a teacher, a K through 5 teacher, she moved on to administration and now has different work. She worked for an organization called Child Mind, which was all about children's mental health and psychology. And she talks to us about what she's learned from that, how she started and got so involved with this specific industry. And she also tells us what she's up to now. So if you want to find out more about Rebecca and what she's up to, it's a pretty amazing work. I'll link that down below. And before we jump into this, if you haven't given the show a rating or subscribe to it, please do so on whatever platform you're listening to. I hope you enjoy the show with Rebecca. Let's just go ahead and jump into it. Rebecca, thanks so much for joining. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Are you in New York right now?
I'm in Brooklyn, New York. I've been here the entire pandemic, haven't left.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I know 2 NYU grads. One is you, the other is Nastia Lukin. I don't know if that name rings a bell, but
I feel like she's maybe an ice skater.
Gymnast. Yeah, close.
A gymnast.
Close. Man. But, impressive resumes the both of you have. I would love if you could give us a start with kind of the foundation of where you grew up, what your parents did, and the potted version of how you became this person we see today.
Yeah, happy to. So I'm from a small town in north central Massachusetts named Groton, called Groton. There's a Groton in every New England town, and that's the one fun fact I can ever give you about anything.
Groton?
Groton, Groton.
Who is that guy?
I have
What did he
no
do?
idea. But Paul Revere rode through my town. So it's
Wow.
like old New England town, very, very small. Born and raised there. And I have one older sister. And you asked what my parents do. My dad is a physicist, and which is super cool. And my mom was always a stay-at-home mom, which was the best. And so I was raised in this really small town, and I always knew that I wanted to live in New York and that I did not want to be in a small town. So I graduated and I made the bold choice of studying abroad my freshman year. So I moved to Paris I just turned 18. Like I knew nothing. I knew absolutely nothing. I was so terrified all the time. Oh, it was so scary. So I moved to Paris, spent a year there, and then I moved to New York. And I just love New York. I'm one of those diehards. I think it's the best place on the planet. I'll probably live here for the rest of my life. And kind of professionally, I never knew what I wanted to do. And that was always a really ambiguous thing for me. I was the kid who also never even wanted to go to college. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't want to feel confined or constrained. I liked school when I liked what I was learning about, but I didn't like school when it was something that I felt was just a class for the sake of a class, or like a prerequisite because everyone has to take them. So through my college career, I found my way by finding professors that I really enjoyed and finding people that I felt like I really connected with. And so that led me, kind of giving you the super fast version of this, but it led me to completing my undergrad in sociology was my major, and a minor in public health and policy. And one of the professors that I had got me, kind of gave me this insider scoop. It's not insider scoop, but I thought it was, about a master's program at NYU's Wagner School of Public Service in health policy. And I was really fascinated by policy work, really fascinated by health policy. And I started this graduate degree while I was an undergrad. And then finished it at night in this really painful way. I was working full time in the school setting, so I was getting to work at 6 a.m. and I'm working for 14 hours and then going to class. Painful, but so worth it. And that was the thing that kind of toggled me on to what I'm doing now, which is all this health work and kind of applying policies into real life. And so that's really what the pathway was. It was not at all intentional. It was not accidental, not intentional either. I've really just tried to follow what feels like the right thing. And then when it doesn't feel right anymore, make another decision that feels right. And that's sort of the guiding principle of all of the career stuff.
Wow, that's really phenomenal advice. I would love to hear how'd you got into teaching? Because it seemed, I mean, it's related, but tell us your
Yeah.
experience.
So teaching is the hardest job that's ever, I mean, the most important work. And I was a teacher. This is a little bit shameful, but I'll share it because we're being transparent about careers. But I became a teacher because I loved kids, but I also didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I had immense respect for teachers. I feel like a person who can manage a classroom can really manage anything. And so I went into it with this incredible amount of respect for the profession. Probably not enough acknowledgement of what it means to be a good teacher, but certainly a lot of aspiration. And so I lasted all of a year as a third grade teacher in Harlem. It was not the career for me, but I was there and I learned a lot. And I learned some really valuable things about what I wanted. So I loved seeing the impact of work with kids and families. I didn't love being in the classroom with them all day long, but I loved having those relationships. And so that was kind of a cue, like, okay, I'm hovering around the right space, but I'm not in my career path. And I think there's something so wonderful about career teachers really investing in their craft and honing their skill. That wasn't for me. And so what I ended up doing was transitioning into a role within the same system where I was managing IEPs, so individualized education plans or programs for kids who maybe had behavioral or academic needs. And that was so gratifying. And I loved it because I was working with kids and their families, building these close relationships to understand what support they needed and trying to advocate for that. And I really saw myself as an advocate for the kids, where I was liaising with the Department of Education to make sure that kids were getting services that they needed. I was supporting teachers and supporting families, kind of making that whole orchestra come together. And that was super gratifying. So teaching was the way that I got into that. But it wasn't, teaching was not the end of the road for me, unfortunately, I think. Hats off to those people who teach for decades. I think it's a stronger breed than I am to do that.
So I've never taught, Rebecca. I'm curious, from your perspective, what are the qualities that make a good teacher?
You have to be incredibly selfless. I think you also have to be super smart. Teachers are the smartest people I've met, and really quick. And the reason I say really quick is because you have 30 kids in your classroom. Each child is different and each child has their own needs. And every teacher that I've met is so invested in making sure that every child leaves at the end of the school day with a positive experience and having their needs met. And then you have the kids, but then you also have the families and the parents, and parents have their own needs, right? Because they're concerned about their kids. They want to celebrate the wins. They want to address the concerns. And so teaching is an around the clock job. Teachers make themselves available. There are also demands from administration. They have to be compliant with so many things, whether it's a school specific rule or it's some regulatory something that they have to do. And so I think when you think about kind of the weight of what a good teacher is able to do and the role that they have, and then all of the things that they have to be responsible for. And then they start their day so early and they have to do that all before I've even had a cup of coffee. It's like, I just think, hats off to teachers. I say it all the time. I say it to anyone I can talk to. I think that is the most impactful work that can be done. We don't pay them enough. I could get on a soapbox about it. I'll spare you, but I think they're just amazing.
No, it's so interesting. I mean, it's not a new concept that teachers are underappreciated and undervalued. And it's like, at some point, I feel like we just got to figure the problem out, like these people from a parent's perspective, are you like being around one kid? We have one child.
She's cute as a button. She's really cute.
She's a lot of fun, but that's hard enough work. I can't imagine spending hours in a classroom with 30 kids and how emotionally taxing that is. It's just like, Anyway, again, soapbox.
Yeah.
But how many years did
Whatever.
you spend in the more administrative role you mentioned after you were teaching?
Gosh, I think I was there for 2 years. I was there for 2 years. I moved to a school that I was at for those 2 years. And that was amazing. It was so stressful, but it was amazing. Um, and that role had me kind of interacting with all of these folks, making process improvement in a school to really
Mm-hmm.
make sure that we were supporting our kids. There were some issues that we needed to work on. We needed to make sure that we had better identification processes. So a child should not sit in a school for a full year and then at the end of the year be like, oh, maybe we could provide them with some extra support, right? You want to catch things early and you want to make sure that you're being really communicative with families about all that. So I was there for 2 years, and then it was time to move on. New environment.
So you mentioned that a big priority of yours was to be an advocate for the kids, and
Yeah.
your current work with the Child Mind Institute obviously has a lot to do with that. I would love for you to talk about that, but then also, what are your origins of wanting to be in this line of work?
Yeah.
Why are you so passionate about that?
So I'll start there. I don't know why. I've always loved kids. I've always loved working with kids. Most of my summer jobs growing up, everything from a camp counselor to doing some babysitting work, I've just always loved kids. Um, when I was in college, I worked with America Reads, and that was great. I worked in a kindergarten classroom, and I loved it. And I also had a work study job that was giving tours of NYU to students who come from schools with low college matriculation rates. And so that was also really interesting work. And I think all the signs were just pointing me in the direction of go work with kids. And that was reinforced by a lot of the policy work that I studied in grad school. The professor who really kind of got me on the track to
Mm-hmm.
the graduate program I did, one of the things he taught us and kind of reinforced over and over is that you have to know the rules before you break them. And so it was really important to me to get experience in the settings in which I was eventually going to be impacting policy. And upon reflecting on my career, I started in the classroom and then I worked at a more administrative level. And I went to a nonprofit organization where I was administering these programs to school and community setting. I've since made another career move. I'm now working in the insurance space for a company that's really trying to reimagine healthcare. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of health policy work within that. And so what I like to think is that even though there's not some broader strategy here, maybe there is, and I just wasn't aware of it. But now that I'm kind of far enough out from my grad school and undergrad days, I can see it, and it was always there. I just didn't know.
Yeah.
But there's kind of this like movement of getting the ground up experience versus coming in. No one likes the person who talks without the experience of what they're trying to change. So I don't want to be that. I want to know what, if you're going to make a policy that affects kids and families, let's know exactly what it would feel like on the receiving end. And so I think there's something to that. And there's probably some process and thinking that is happening in the back of my brain that I'm just not aware of. But as I kind of reflect on what my career has been, I think there's more continuity than I thought there was. You asked another question and I totally lost it.
About Child Mind. I would love to hear about your work there.
Yeah. So I was there for 4 years. Super neat place. And they do a lot of work around clinical care for kids and families who come to their brick and mortars. Cutting edge research. And where I sat and really built up was the school and community-based programs, providing treatment for kids struggling with symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder,
Wow.
depression, and ADHD and destructive behavior disorders. And so that was amazing because I was working with social workers and psychologists and school psychologists to build these programs that bring expert clinicians into schools during the school day. And so what you create is an environment where you're you're taking this highly stigmatized yet highly effective treatment, and you are removing those barriers. So you're going to kids during the school day, so there's no travel time, and these programs are supported by philanthropic dollars, so there's no cost associated with it. And it's happening in the school setting, which is traditionally a friendlier, safer setting for families versus going to another site of care. And so all these pieces come together, and you're able to access kids that might not otherwise have access to these services that are so life-changing. And so in the time that I was there, we expanded services outside of New York City, did some work in Newark, New Jersey, a lot of work down in Baltimore, Maryland, with capacity building programs to train mental health providers in the community to deliver these services, and then opening a site in the San Francisco Bay Area and launching out there. And so there's a lot of good work to be done. And I left right at the start of the pandemic, a little bit into the pandemic, and so was able to support with some of the transition to virtual, and then made moves out. But definitely, I think I'm always going to look back on the work that I did there and feel like that was a career highlight, because the work was really so gratifying. The people that I worked with were so amazing. The social workers and psychologists that I worked with on those teams to deliver the services are just, they are true angels. And the administrative team that I worked with was also just beyond incredible. Still keep in touch with all of them because they're just so wonderful. So that was really, really a career highlight, and work I'm really, really proud of.
Yeah. You said PTSD for kids. I guess this comes from a place of ignorance, but that to me is PTSD seems like just a military veteran's condition,
Yeah.
How does it apply to kids?
A lot of people think that. Yeah. So PTSD is, I'm going to give you kind of the Cliffs Notes, and then I think always good to talk to a clinician for all of the cool details. There's a lot that goes into PTSD, but it's a disorder of recovery, and it's subjective. So two people can experience the same event, and one may recover and not experience any impairment to functioning, and another might develop symptoms of PTSD. And so that's really you want to watch for it and then treat it when it does happen. And so there are all types of events that can serve as a traumatic event for anyone. And so when we were working with kids, we had a lot of instances of loss of a loved one, domestic violence, shootings, community violence, natural disasters. So kids who lived through Superstorm Sandy in 2012, absolutely could have been a traumatic event for them. Shelter stays, housing instability, kind of when you think about the core areas of need that anyone has, if there's instability to those, that can serve as a traumatic event. So we worked with in a group setting to treat kids. And what's super cool about that is you can have various traumatic events be treated in a setting together. And so we were able to really reach a lot of kids all at once.
So the way you make decisions seems very intuitive, but also sounds like you put a decent amount of thought into it,
Yeah.
But it seems like your self-awareness is acute in the sense that, obviously as it's you reflecting, but you talking about your experience with kids and, oh my gosh, I love this experience, but I don't like being with the classroom every day. So to walk us through your decision to leave Childmind during a pandemic to a new industry away from the nonprofit sector.
Yeah.
How did you make that decision?
Well, that was probably one of the bolder decisions that I've made. And, for what it's worth, for anyone who's considering a job change during a pandemic, kind of challenging. So when will I ever see the office that I go to? I don't know. Maybe in a year from now, who actually knows? So definitely challenging. All I can say about it is it felt like it was time for the next thing. I had built these programs that I felt really, really proud of. And I also had built this team that I felt so confident in to lead the charge that I kind of made myself obsolete in a good way.
Wow.
And I think there are people who have kind of like delegation issues. And then there's me who's like, let me work myself out of this job because that means that things are running and I've done what I'm here to do. I also have identified in myself that I have a passion for new programs, kind of nascent stage growth, I think is where I feel like I can use my creativity and my project management skills the most. And so programs had reached scale, or were at a place where they were approaching scale. And I know the pandemic kind of throws a wrench in some of that, and things are probably going to change in ways that I no longer know because I'm not there. But I think that in acknowledging that in myself, it felt like it was time for some new kind of adventure. And I don't love change, but I do like to always be really engaged in the work that I'm doing. And for better or for worse, I also love working. So it just felt like it was time to do something a little bit different. And I struggled with that decision for a while because I felt a lot of guilt about leaving the programs that I had been such a part of developing and growing. But I sat with that for a little while, and I'm also trying to be just kind of less of a people pleaser. And when I put all of that together, it decided that it was time to make a change.
And so now the insurance industry.
Yeah. So what am I doing now? So I am leading the charge on the behavioral health program at a very cool late stage startup. I guess technically they're 8 years old. And working on in-housing behavioral health operations and working on the broader strategy for the organization. And what I'm enjoying about it is, for one thing, there's more reach and there's more impact. So it's impact in a different way. You don't get on the phone with a teacher or with a parent and hear about the impact of the program that you provided them, right? I think it's a different type of impact, but there's a more policy-oriented impact where can you develop a program that integrates behavioral and medical to provide members with best-in-class care that is patient-centered, that doesn't cost an arm and a leg and come with a ton of stigma, and that can make it less clunky or confusing. So that's what we're trying to do. And I am not going to pretend for 1 second like insurance is my dream end all be all. I think for some people it is, and that's great. But what I am doing is gathering all of these. I think there's so much value in being effective in different environments and understanding different environments. And so this is the piece where I think back to that grad school professor who says, know the rules before you break them. And I like to think that I'm kind of on this lifelong pursuit to understand these various domains and dynamics and be effective in them, right? I want to kind of go in and my goal every day when I go to work is to show up and be a value add. And that can be a small thing and that can be a big thing. But that's the goal every single day. And then at a certain point, I'm going to say, well, it's time for the next thing. And I'm going to go. And I don't know when that is. That could be in 10 years from now, right? Like I have no idea. But I do know that there's valuable learning to be done. And I'm certainly not done. I'm sure there's going to be another environment where I say, you know what, maybe I'll go corporate next. Yeah. And I'll wear a pencil skirt. I don't know. That sounds terrible. I'm like, my body's itching just thinking about that as I sit here in sweatpants. But like,
I don't know what that is, but it sounds terrible. Yeah.
Like pantyhose and a pair of pumps. No, sounds terrible. But I don't know. Maybe that will be the next thing. So it was, the other thing that's very cool about it is I'm the first person who's dedicated to doing this for this company, and it's a nascent stage program. And so that is my thing. That's like, great, it's a new thing and you need someone to think about it 24/7, not 24/7, 8 hours a day and develop it and grow it. Great, I'm your girl for that. And so that's what I'm doing right now.
This is a question, at least I think it's tough. How do you build a team that you don't need to be a part of anymore? I have realized being a part of a sports team is in a lot of ways pretty easy. I think it's mostly like building the culture of that team, but everybody has such definitive job roles and there's a tight schedule and like whatever. As a peer elected leader, there's really not an overwhelming amount of things for you to do. But outside of that, building a team for me has been harder. And even though I've read books and put thought into it, it's such a tough problem. So how did you do it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think one thing that's critical about it is make team leadership the majority of your job. So I think there are a lot of people who are technically savvy in the role that they do. They get promoted to lead a team, and then they bring that, but the leadership qualities and the management qualities of people, that's something that needs to be bolstered. And so there has to be a shift there that you know your time needs to reflect your priorities. That's the calendar exercise we all know we need to do all the time, right? Like, are you spending the percentage of your week doing the things that you should be doing? And so I think investing in the team needs to be represented on your calendar. The other thing, and I think this is the hardest thing, but it's the most important, is one thing I always tried to do if someone on my team came to me with a question or they were looking for guidance, was to be non-reactive, right? Like, nothing is an emergency. So take that off the table. There should never be any fear. There should never be any kind of concern involved. But the second thing, most important, is ask your team, what do you think about it? How do you want to solve the problem? What do you what do you recommend we do? And whenever I did that, it took the power back. I was just there for the affirmation or the validation. And you scaffold that, you build it over time. I think a lot of that boils down to building confidence in people that they don't need you. And so when they don't need you and they can operate without you, then great. Then you're good to go. It takes time. You have to build it. But I think that that's something that is hard to do. And I remember when I first led a team, I would be on my email constantly if I was off for a day, answering every question because I didn't want anyone to be without the support that they needed. And that was learning that I was in fact a bottleneck, where if I left for a day, folks didn't have what they needed, which meant that I wasn't doing my job. So when I was able to take days off and no one needed me, then I was like, oh, I actually am obsolete now. This is fantastic.
Yeah. My natural tendency as a team member or manager, I guess, is almost like too high of trust. Like, hey, you're a part of the team. You can do this. And so I would like almost be discouraging of people asking me because just my response wouldn't be super encouraging. So I'm trying to do a better job of understanding that there's certain steps to take for those people to understand that they have my trust fully. You know what I'm saying? Anyway,
it's so hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. One thing that I struggled with a lot was being overly permissive. And I learned, I'm definitely not perfect at this, and it's a hard thing, but I never want to be mean. I'm a people pleaser, we established. I never want to be mean, and I never want to make people feel uncomfortable, and I never want to make people feel impositioned. And so that's what I'm always trying to work on. And so there have been moments where I am too permissive because I want to make people happy. And that ends up all of a sudden, you extrapolate that out and you have someone who's chronically late for work or missed a deadline, right? Like, and so there are things that are these tendencies that are really hard because that's how you are like socially, right? And so that kind of comes into the workplace and you have to build in stop gaps and corrections. But oh my God, it's so hard. And then you care. If you're an empathetic person, you care a lot. It's hard. But I enjoy it. It's always a challenge. But hire the right people and then let them do their thing. I think that's the secret sauce.
Yeah. Rebecca, what are your goals? Let's talk about specifically your career goals.
Oh gosh, what are my career goals?
It could even just be like, what effect do you want to leave a legacy?
Yeah. For the first time, this is really ambiguous to me. So in every environment I've been in, I think I've kind of hinged some of my goals based on that environment. And then I've made a shift and I'm like, oh, now I need new goals because I don't have a 5-year plan really. And so when I was in my last company, I was like, oh, maybe I'll become an executive director of a nonprofit that I feel really passionately about. And that's still in the back of my mind, something that I would really, really love doing. now that I'm in insurance, do I want to run an insurance company? No. So I think I need a new goal. Ultimately, what I want to do is work that I feel really good about, that feels ethical and impactful and helpful, and actually is informed by the people who benefit from whatever the service is. I don't want to get on my pedestal and kind of tout something that is not responsive to the people I'm working with or for, really. Um, Otherwise, no, I think I really love leading a team. I think I would be super happy if I was always leading a team that I felt really good about. And that would make me so happy. In terms of other, like the harder metrics, what title I want, what salary I want to have, I don't know. I mean, salary, like give me more money. Yeah, but like, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think there are some people who wake up with a dollar amount and they're like, by this age, I'm going to do this. And I'm like,
Yeah.
but will I be happy? And happiness counts for so much. And I think you can be happy at work. And so that's something I always strive for as well. So, I don't know. I'll get back to you. I'll shoot you an email.
Yeah.
I'll let you
No,
know when I come up with goals.
in a lot of ways, I think that's good. And not having a definitive endpoint sometimes I feel like can actually grow your dream. That's my profound thought for the day, Rebecca, right there.
I like it. I like that I'm
like,
receiving it.
I'm curious, when you look over the course of your career trajectory and how you've gotten to where you are, what advice have people given you, or have you learned that, let's say, 3 pieces of advice that you could share with us?
Yeah. Okay. I've had some really strong female mentors over the course of time, largely informal, but I think that all of this comes from them. So the first one is shine theory. So shine theory is basically just giving praise to the people who deserve it. And I think there's a lot of toxicity in work cultures where folks don't do this enough. And it's really powerful, particularly among women. And I can really only speak for being a woman. So that's often the perspective that I talk from as when I talk about being in the workplace. But there's something so powerful about publicly, say you're in a meeting with 12 people and there's a good idea shared, and shouting out from across the table, and that credit goes to this person because they came up with that, and that's a really wonderful idea. And creating that culture of shine, I think, is it's not something that everyone does, and once you're attuned to it, you notice how much people don't do it and how willing people are to use up other people's ideas.
I love that.
Right?
Let me practice it right now.
See, there you go. There you go. And I think, for one thing, you make someone's day so quickly. But it's also like that's the culture that we all want to work in. You want to be acknowledged for your ideas. You want to be acknowledged for the work that you put in. No one wants to be kind of irrationally blown up, right? Like, I don't need to be told that I'm the best thing that's ever happened to anyone, but I do want to be told, like, hey, I acknowledge you for the hours that you put into this product, and it came out really well, and you're strengthening our mission by doing this. That's what I want to hear. So shine theory. The second is related, but I had someone tell me that as you get further in your career, you need to be more mindful of thanking people. And so, like, if someone gave you some information about the way something works that allowed you to then go make a decision for something that you're doing that might be related or unrelated, go circle back and thank them for that. And they probably won't notice if you don't thank them, but they will notice if you do. And that brings to the third piece, which is invest in relationships. And I think all this is about relationship development and management. And if you have strong relationships with people, I mean, for one thing, if you're willing to do something for someone that is a little bit out of your way, the next time you need something, it's not even a question, right? You build that exchange back and forth. I also feel like that's a really good way to build respect. And then if you don't have bandwidth for something, you can say, hey, I know you need this, but I need another week. And there's no kerfuffle over anything, because you have a really good track record and rapport. And so that's the big one that I always emphasize with people. And I think you can get through a lot of really sticky work situations when you have a foundation of a relationship to lean on. So shine theory, thanking everyone, relationships. I feel like I just like recapped the golden rule, but for adults.
You're so wise, Rebecca. So wise. I love where you focus. All those three were about relationships, and it seems like that is your main focus, to your point earlier.
Yep.
And it's clearly working for you. So I learned a lot from you, and I appreciate you taking the time. I'm excited for what's next, and let us know if we can ever help you in any way.
Oh, I mean, sure. I'll let you know. I'll be like, hey, I need to pull in a
Please,
favor. Can
please.
you get the Olympic team on the phone or something?
With things that I could actually help with. I would love to help, but yeah.
Awesome.
No, I appreciate
Yeah.
your time, Rebecca, and it was an honor to meet you.
Oh, it's great to meet you. Thanks for the really wonderful questions, and happy to chat all the time.